we have trim statements coming out later this week, I believe, right? So we wanted to have you in and kind of explain why the trim is so important and tell people don't hit that panic button because it's not a bill.
Correct.
Because I think a lot of people look at it and go, oh, I got to go pay this right now. No,
True. Yeah.
That's not how that works. It's an informational.
It's a notice.
It's a projection
right.
of, usually you give a couple of different things. But tell us a little bit about the trim statement that's coming out this week so people can better understand when they get it in their hand what they're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And good morning, Troy and Blake, and thank you for having me back again. It's a pleasure to be here. It is an important time of the year. It's property tax time. We're going into that cycle. So this is the first thing you get, and to property owners in the county, this is the most important mailer you will get this year on your property taxes. It's the trim notice or the notice of proposed taxes. They'll be mailed August 17th to every property owner in St. Johns County. And that trim notice on the outside of the envelope, it says this is not a bill. A couple of things happen. Sometimes people throw it away when they see it's not a bill, but don't throw it away. It's very important. The second thing is Troy says they want to rush down to the tax collector's office and pay that, which is not time to do that. So the trim notice is your notice of proposed taxes. And what the trim does is give you an enormous amount of information about your property. The first thing it tells you is what your values were last year, what your market value, assessed value, taxable value was last year. It shows you any exemptions that you had last year, and it shows you the taxes or the property taxes you paid last year. The next thing it shows you is your proposed property taxes for this year. And it shows your proposed adjustment, your proposed just market value, your proposed assessed value, and your proposed taxable value. And then based on the budgets of the county taxing authorities, it shows you what your proposed property taxes will be. The third column or the middle column is what your property taxes would be if the taxing authorities collected the same amount of money they did last year. And that's known as the rollback rate. Those three numbers are very important. It also shows you, as I said, the exemptions that you have. It shows your assessed value, your Save Our Homes portability, if any, your non-homestead caps, if any, on the property. But it also triggers a 25-day period under the trim process that you can apply for an exemption. If you are qualified for exemption and you didn't receive it, you didn't apply for it, during that period, if you apply, we can grant that exemption to you. Okay. If you have questions about your value, your assessed value, or your just market value, reach out to our office. That is a time we can correct it. If there's been a difference in opinion or an error that perhaps was made, you can reach out to our office anytime during the tax year. But once we certify the roll to the Department of Revenue, we can't make changes until that 25-day trim period. During that period, we can work with the taxpayer, the property owner. We can get exemptions on that you might qualify for. We can take a look at values. We can have our quality control appraisers look at what your property's been appraised at and make any changes. The last thing about trim, if for some reason our office and the taxpayer, property owner, can't agree, the property owner, taxpayer can file an appeal with the Value Adjustment Board, and the Value Adjustment Board is independent of our office. It is actually falls under the clerk of the court's office, and when you file that appeal with the Value Adjustment Board, you will be scheduled a hearing before an independent magistrate. And that magistrate will hear the property appraiser's reasons, they will hear the taxpayer's reasons, and that magistrate will make a decision on what the outcome should be. And should that decision, and they normally are statutory, legal, the property appraiser accepts that decision and we move forward.
All right. And I think a lot of people think businesses and residentials are taxed the same. But they're slightly different. Like a lot of times businesses are taxed per like almost a revenue-based decision. And I think sometimes business owners get confused on how they're evaluated because they look at it as it's valued the same as their house, right, in a lot of ways. Can you explain the main difference of those two as a business owner and as your business property and your house, because they're looked at differently from your office and they're taxed differently from from the tax collector side.
Yeah, and that's correct. And on residential property, Florida's known as a market value state, where the property appraiser is required by statute to appraise at just market value. On residential properties, St. Johns County, we're very fortunate that we have a large number of sales every year and a large number of newly constructed homes. So it's not typically very difficult to establish a just market value. Businesses, on the other hand, are assessed at just market value really by two methods. One is the income approach, which is accepted appraisal standards. And if there's not a stabilized income, then it's the cost approach. So while they're taxed the same millage rates, the appraisal methodology is different. So if you have an apartment complex or a hotel or Beaux-Arts Ford, then you're taxed on the income approach, which is basically the discounted cash flows that the business is producing. And that is more a representation of just market value on an operating business. Now, there's some smaller businesses that we will rely heavier on the cost approach. But once a new business stabilizes, if it's a new apartment complex, maybe the first 3 years, we're going to do that on cost till the apartments are rented and the income flow stabilizes. At that point, then we're going to move to the income approach. We send out postcards every year to business owners, and we ask them for their financial statements because we use those in our assessment. Many business owners supply that to us, which is very good because it allows us to be more accurate in assessing that property. Many do not supply those to us because they think maybe it will be a penalty to them to do that, which is really a penalty for them to not
do it.
So if they don't give us their financial statements, which are, by the way, confidential, they're protected from public records request and any of those statutes, then we have to go to other sources to find that income. So we'll go to the Florida Department of Revenue and get the sales and use tax report to see what sales taxes are being paid. Then we can back into the income. And then we'll use sources like CoStar, CB Richard Ellis that show us the income and expenses from similar properties that are reporting in our market. So, and the other big difference in the businesses and homesteads particularly is the cap on the assessed value for a business is 10% annually. And the cap on a residential homestead property is 3%. So their values will go up faster than residential properties.
The caps are different. I mean,
yes, but it's basically the approach, and it's the income approach to value on businesses.
All right. Now there are four. We talked a little bit before the show. You have four primary things that your property appraiser actually does. Setting property values and doing that is one of the four. Explain the four that you guys actually do, because I think a lot of people think of property appraisers, they just go straight to the name, and this is all you do. But you do more than that. Yeah,
absolutely. The property appraiser in Florida is a constitutional officer established by the Florida Constitution. And we have one task, and that task is to create a tax roll for the taxing authorities in the county. The county commission, the school board, St. Johns River Water Management District. A taxing authority is any entity that can impose a millage rate on the value of your property. And to accomplish that, there's four parts of our process, and they're basically four equal parts, some being more technical and more complicated than others. But the first part is we are the recorder and tracker of ownership for real estate in the county. So each parcel has a unique parcel ID that we assign that is tracked in perpetuity for that parcel. New parcels are logged, recorded. Parcel IDs are signed. When acreage is converted into lots, our office transfers that from one parcel ID to multiple parcel IDs. And so through that ownership process, we can track a parcel of land in our county from, like today, it may be a 100 by 175 foot lot, where 70 years ago, it was part of a 5,000 acre timber tract. We can actually track that back for ownership records and history. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing we do in our office is we are the cadastre of the county, and that is the mapper in the county. So we have a Geographic Information Systems, or GIS department, that does the maps. So every deed that comes through, every plat that comes through, every easement that comes through, They're recorded at the clerk of the court's office. They come to our office, and our GIS department maps that or updates maps accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing we do, which actually may be the most important thing we do, is we administer all exemptions in the county.
Mm-hmm.
Most people think of homestead exemption, but Florida has a number of other exemptions that are very important and very generous. And our office administers those. To receive an exemption in Florida, you have to apply for it. The application comes through our office. We make sure that you meet the qualifications, and then we grant that exemption. The grant of that exemption doesn't stop that process. We review and evaluate those exemptions on an ongoing basis to make sure the property owner still qualifies for that exemption. Now, inside of that also falls the classified use, and the most important classified use in our county is agriculture. So our county administers, our property appraiser administers agricultural classifications on an annual basis. And then the fourth thing we do is we assess all real and personal property in the county once every year for those tax rolls. And all the pieces of that, those four pieces, go into the makeup of the tax roll that we submit first to the Florida Department of Revenue in June for approval. And then once the Florida Department of Revenue approves our tax roll, then we submit it to the taxing authority so they can begin their budgeting process. And so each of those parts are, in my mind, equal. If I had to weigh a part that becomes more important than what our office does, it would be the exemption process, because we administer over 100,000 exemptions in our county. And we process about 12,000 new exemption applications every year. So that would weight that the heaviest. The most technical thing we do is mapping. Mapping is fascinating to me. It's not as easy as you take a picture. It's actually you take a deed and run it out. So.
And with the technology, with the mapping, with the satellites and the and everything else that's available, I felt like before we had this technology, the evaluations didn't happen every year. But it seems like the technology's allowed you to do the evaluations every year. About what time frame, because this is your third term now as property appraiser, about what time frame did that happen? Did it happen before you got there, or was it the every year? Because I felt like it used to be like, okay, we get evaluated every 3 years, and then you'd see a movement every 3 years, and there's a slight adjustments each year now, but you have our Save Our Home, so it's pretty much going to be what that is. But at what point did the technology really advance to where, because you couldn't have the manpower if it wasn't for the technology to get out there and see every single.
During my tenure, it's always been a January 1st assessment date every year. And I think for some time before that, it was every year, January 1st. I'm not sure at what point that changed. A fascinating part of the mapping is mapping today starts at the same place mapping did 40 years ago. And that's with the deed or the plat. And our GIS technicians will actually take a deed or a plat and they will map. And sometimes the deeds that we get in, if you have changed a timber tract to lots, those deeds can be 20 or 30 pages long.
Gotcha.
And our GIS technicians actually start with the legal description, begin at the northwest quadrant of the southeast corner, and they start mapping from that. The technology actually allows us and the property owner to have a better visual representation of what that ownership looks like. So now they can look at an online map, satellite imagery, aerial photography, and see where those landlines fall. But it actually begins with the reading of a deed or a plat or an easement, something like that.
Yeah, and a lot of people are confused. The millage rate is set by the Board of County Commissioners. You just take that millage rate and you put it into the formula. A lot of people come in and probably are angry with you because their taxes are high, or they're angry with Jennifer because that's who they're paying. Probably her more so than you. But where do you think that do you think the confusion comes from, and how do you manage that without sounding like, well, it's not my fault? It's because I can see some of the complaints of, okay, why'd you do this?
Well,
why is my taxes so high? It's not you. It's not you at all.
Well, and we take our share of blame, and rightly so, because millage rates are applied to values, right? So we establish the values. The taxing authorities create the millage rates. That's the tax rate that's created. So if your taxes go up, it's, your rates have either stayed the same and your property value has gone up, or your rates have gone up. People say, well, I don't want my property value to go up. And actually, we really all do want our property value to go up. Normally, for most of us, especially homeowners, and I know it's true for me, the biggest asset we'll ever hold in our life is our home. We don't want the value of that home to go down. I was a banker before this for 35 years, and I can tell you when the value of property goes down and the value of homes go down, bad things happen.
Yeah.
That's not a good point at any, cycle in the economy. I think the reason that, we hear it kind of first is because while the taxing authorities create those millage rates, it's done at a board meeting. And maybe 30, 40, 50 people are at that board meeting. I am the office that gets to mail that and tell everybody what it was.
You're the one who,
right.
You're the messenger.
So when they see notice of proposed taxes, it says Eddie Creamer, St. Johns County Property Appraiser. Yeah. I also publish in my direct phone number on those trim notices. So when the phone rings, I answer it as well. So I think we are the first point of contact. Our staff is very well versed and very well trained. I have a tremendous staff. So when those calls come in, we tell them we can discuss with them their value and why it changed and how we determined it. If they want to talk about the tax rates, then we give them the number for the Board of County Commissioners or the school board. And last year was a pretty substantial increase in taxes because we got a 1 mil increase in school taxes.
Yeah, the school.
And one millage rate is 1 mil is significant.
Yeah.
I mean, your value can go up quite a bit from year to year, but it won't offset what a mill increase does.
Well, and I got onto the school district a little bit earlier in the year because
we voted for it.
Yeah,
the county voted for that.
We voted for it. We gave it to them, and then they were complaining about not having enough money. And I was like, "Oh, wait a second! You're the only person who got it voted in, and you can't. It's like." Blake asking for $20. I gave him $20, and then he said, "Oh, I meant 30." Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So the taxpayers call us during trim, and we work through that process, and then things calm down a little bit. And then Jennifer Raven, the tax collector, in November, she mails the tax bills, and then she gets the calls because she is then the name on the bill that goes out.
Yeah. Now we're back to Eddie and that question, Blake. I knew that was the one you had there because in the comments, people were asking about senior reductions, senior age reductions. At what age does that start, and how much does that come into play with the calculations?
Okay. Right now, Florida has 2 senior exemptions, and those can come into play at age 65. However, both of those exemptions are somewhat difficult to qualify for, which is unfortunate. And I know our office, I personally have lobbied to improve those over the years, and so far to no avail. The first senior exemption at age 65 is an additional $50,000 off of your assessed value, which is generous. However, it's income-based. And the income, your adjusted gross income, has to be less than about $38,000 a year. This is St. Johns County.
Yeah.
There's to qualify for an adjusted gross income exemption at $38,000. There's just not many people who qualify for that. And out of 152,000 residential homes in our county total, we only have 2,700 senior exemptions. The second senior exemption is if you are 65, if you meet the income requirement, if you have been in your home for 25 years, and the value of your home is $250,000 or less, you qualify for a total exemption.
Okay.
Well, first of all, in St. Johns County, the median sales price of a home is about $560,000. There's not a lot of homes that are valued below $250,000 that have a assessed value below $250,000 or market value below $250,000. So, unfortunately, yes, they're age-based, they're income-based, and can be value-based. It is difficult to qualify for.
If it's a couple that is strictly living off Social Security, and it's, would you say it's under 250?
Well, for the 50,000, that's not a value base; it's just income base.
Okay.
So if your adjusted gross income is below the 38,
Okay.
and you are 65, one person in the household is 65 or over, you qualify for that.
So just one person has to be,
Yes.
not both. Oh,
Yes.
okay. All right. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
If it's homesteaded, you have to be homesteaded, and if one of the homesteaders is over 65 and they meet the income requirement, then they can get the senior exemption.
All right. I've saved this question for last. You know, and we're probably going to have follow-up questions to this as we go. Amendment 3.
Yes.
And Amendment 3 is on the ballot in November. I know everybody in every department has been doing calculations, and this is the one about property taxes on your primary home. It only affects your primary home. Amendment 3, how does this affect your organization, and what are you doing to prepare for it?
Well, if Amendment 3 passes in November, the way it will affect our organization is we will change the programming in our mass appraisal system to change the homestead exemption to the new homestead exemption that will be opposed or be allowed at that point. And then we will change the caps on non-homestead property from the 10% to the 5% that this would do, that would put in place. Outside of that, the impact on our operation and what we do will not change dramatically. The things that, keep in mind about Amendment 3, if it passes, is property taxes will not be eliminated. School taxes are still going to apply to your value. Save Our Home's portability remains unchanged, and all the other exemptions, veterans, seniors, disability, first responders, they all stay in place. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's just a matter of changing the amount of exemption.
Yeah, you're just
caps.
moving it from here to there, and then that.
So if Amendment 3 passes in November, January 1st of next year, the homestead exemption will go from 50,000 to 150,000. Mm-hmm. And the cap on non-homestead properties will drop from 10% to 5%. And then in year 2, or January 1st of 2028, the homestead exemption would increase to 250,000. The cap would stay the same on non-homestead properties. So for us, the ownership recording, the deeds, the mapping, the exemption processing, and the valuation remains the same for us.
All right. Do you think, and this is, and I hate to put projections out there, because as I'm looking at Amendment 3, do you think there's going to be some people that are going to be trying to go after more homestead exemptions? That is there a chance of almost a fraud situation on homestead exemptions because of they see the value of the savings of that? Because if I had a rental property, I could see someone being tempted of, okay, I'm going to claim this one. So how are you going to manage that? Because I see if there's an opportunity, people are going to try and do it. How do you think you're going to be able to manage that of people trying to qualify for homestead when they don't qualify? I think that's going to increase if this passes.
I think I think you're exactly right. There could be more people try to get homestead that maybe don't qualify. One of the things, among the many things our office does very well, is exemption compliance. And we start on the front at the application. When you apply with our office for homestead exemption, whether you do it in person or whether you do it online, we check a large number of databases nationwide to make sure the things you have told us are true, and to make sure we don't find things that maybe you forgot to tell us. And then we have a very, very sophisticated ongoing monitoring. We monitor every homesteaded property in our county every month to make sure there are not changes in ownership, changes in status, or even changes that occur outside of Florida that would affect your status in Florida for homestead. So we'll just continue that process as we do it now. Because it is Florida and the homestead exemption is already very generous, and there are people that will try to claim a homestead here to avoid income taxes in another state. There are people who apply for homestead here, but don't realize they're getting some kind of homestead credit in another state. It's just applied to the property. So, our staff and the sources we use for compliance, I would say are very robust in that. And we do our very best to catch that at the application, because if we can catch it at the application, we can give you time to cure it and get your homestead, or decide you don't want to cure it in the other state. And then it's kind of no harm, no foul. You don't get the exemption. If we find it later, the statutes are very punitive for that to the taxpayer. They're very significant penalties. There's a very high interest rate, and then all back taxes are collected. And we don't want that to happen to a property owner. We want to catch it soon.
Yeah.
And that I don't consider myself, I don't like to apply those kind of penalties, and they're applied through liens. I mean, if we find it, we do lien. We place a number of liens, but we would rather catch it up front and give the taxpayer an opportunity to cure it.
Yep. All right. Anything we've left off, because we're kind of coming to the end of where we're at with the show. Anything we left off? You've got trims coming out this week, so be aware and look for the trim statements at the end of this week. Anything that we need to be aware of for the property appraiser's office in this?
Just a couple of things to remind everybody. When you get your trim, if you have any questions, call our office. The second part on Amendment 3 is Amendment 3 will be on the ballot in November. So it will be voted on by all voters in the state. So be looking for that. Be looking for the information that comes out on that. Our office has information on Amendment 3. They're just facts. We don't support or constitutional amendments, or our office is ministerial. So we administer statutes and the Constitution. So the information is available on our website. You can call our office and we'll answer your questions.
All right, Eddie, thanks for coming in. A lot of information there. We really appreciate it.